Thank you, Minister. Senator Lindgren.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Employment, Senator Cash. Will the minister tell the Senate why it is important that workplaces be free from bullying and intimidation?
Good question. In order, in calling the minister, I just advise the minister that because this matter is before the Senate, you can't anticipate debate in this matter. So, Minister, I call the Minister for Employment, Mr Cash.
Well, thank you, Mr President. And as is the position of the coalition government,
on my left,
the long-held position, we believe that everybody in Australia has the right to go to work every single day, in particular in a workplace that is free from harassment, bullying and intimidation, and in particular inappropriate behaviour. And a recent example of inappropriate behaviour is unfortunately within the construction sector. And this is evidenced by the actions of CFMEU official Scott Vink, recently fined $9,000, yet another CFMEU official who has been fined by the courts. This was a fine by the Federal Circuit Court recently for unlawful workplace breaches, and it was described by the court as sheer thuggery. The court heard Mr Vink entered the Pacific Fair Shopping Centre redevelopment site in Queensland in March 2014 and went to a shed set aside for workers' smoko breaks. What did he do then? Well, he began removing belongings of non-union members, including lunches from the refrigerator, and just chucking them outside, because apparently that's what you do when you go onto a work site. He also he was approached by a site manager, and he was found by the court, and I quote, to have used foul and aggressive language towards employees and acted in an angry and abusive manner towards those employees. What he then did was place a padlock on the shed, preventing access to non-members. One of the critical facts that Mr Vink overlooked during this exchange was that the shed on the site had been provided for the use of all of the site workers. It was not the property of the CFMEU. The court basically said that his behaviour, and I quote, was designed to intimidate the employees and to reinforce to others at the building site the notion that non-union membership is not going to be tolerated.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lindgren, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President.
On my left.
Is the minister aware of any other findings of the courts against officials of the CFMEU's Queensland and Northern Territory branch?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. And unfortunately, yes, I am. The litany of judgments against CFMEU officials continues. Last year, the federal court found that CFMEU official Kane Pearson took action against a Northern Territory construction company, Red Day, and I quote, with the intent to coerce them to pay a fee to the union on behalf of the Red Day employees. The court found that Mr Pearson and other CFMEU officials of the union entered Red Day's central apartment project site in Mitchell Street, Darwin, and I quote, not for the legitimate purpose or the legitimate exercise of their right of entry, but to indicate the extent to which the union could disrupt the efficient progress of a building site. And to pick up on one of the interjections from Senator Cameron, this is about the economy, Senator Cameron, because when you don't have a functioning building and construction sector in Australia, all Australians pay more for the buildings that are being constructed.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lindgren, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister advise the Senate why it is important that there be appropriate penalties for breaching industrial law?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. And one of the issues we've seen ever since Labor slashed the penalties applicable to breaches of industrial law is that literally you break the law a little bit like a speeding fine. You speed, you get the fine, you pay it, and you just go into a circle. You speed, you get the fine, you pay it. And that is what we now see on building sites within Australia. The CFMEU are fully aware that the penalties no longer fit the crime, and they have quite literally factored into their business model the penalties for breaching workplace laws. It is a fact that since 2003 the courts have imposed fines of almost $7 million on the CFMEU for proven breaches of workplace laws. But again, Mr President, this does not seem to deter them. 109 officials currently fronting the courts, in excess of 1,000 charges. The penalties clearly are not strong enough.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Whish-Wilson.